Yeah.
So
As good as ever.
the first question is how are you doing today? You know,
How am I doing today?
yeah.
No, very good, very good. We're well, I mean, unlike most companies that normally start winding down for Christmas, ours is the opposite way, because we work with clients that are at their busiest time of the year with the year ends. Most of their financial year ends will end in December. There is actually another financial year end for some at the middle of the year, but yeah, December certainly seems to be for most of them the end of the financial year. So it keeps us very busy. So there's always curveballs coming out this time of the year to keep us on our toes.
Yeah,
particularly now with things being the way that they are.
That's fair. Christmas time as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but yeah, this year we've got the World Cup as well, so it's fantastic, isn't it?
So what kind of area do you work in with the finance?
Right, okay, so we are a data and analytics company. So if you look at somebody like Experian, they collect data on customers and they help customers with a credit rating. Yeah. What we do is we collect data from various data providers across the industry to help insurance companies manage their exposure to certain portfolio risks. So the portfolios that we're talking about are airline portfolios or energy company portfolios or car manufacturing portfolios. So these are policies that they underwrite for big companies that are, tend to be in the big sort of global enterprises. They will obviously also underwrite smaller companies, but it tends to be a specialist market. So it's not like an Aviva type of company. The types of clients that we deal with are around Lloyd's of London. So it's companies that have complex type claims and complex type needs are the types of clients that we deal with.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned that I think you mentioned you're a data-based company.
Yeah, data and analytics.
I had a look at your what it said under your Russell Bank profile, and it talked about you created the claims database for the London market service. Yeah. So what is that in terms of like explaining it to
Okay. So I suppose the nearest equivalent was a credit crunch. Do you remember that? Probably don't even remember that. Right. Okay, right. So this is a lot of this is before my time, right? So I entered the market having sort of been a troubleshooter for Oracle Corporation in 1994, having set the company up prior to that. And our first project was with a company called London Market Claim Services, and what they dealt with was complex problems that the market inherited, and the problems were to do with the super product that was in the 30s and 40s called asbestos. So we know of asbestos as a product that causes breathing difficulties, because the little crystals get in your lungs. But prior to that, it was a super lightweight product that was actually used in buildings across the whole world. And the underwriting of those products was done by Lloyd's.
Okay.
So Lloyd's underwrote everything to do with that type of cover. They also underwrote things like breast implants and anything to do with health hazard, and they also underwrote anything to do with shipping, including pollution. So in the 80s, they had lots of problems. XL Valdez was a massive oil spill in Northern America that polluted all the wildlife, much in the same way that the Deepwater Horizon did, BP in 2014,
Yeah.
causing lots of harm to the landscape. What happened was that with asbestosis, lots of people started becoming ill, and they all tied it back to the product. And then the American lawyers started chasing the insurers for claims, and these claims kept growing and growing and growing. Much like now, you've seen the adverts for diesel claims.
Yes, yeah.
So when there is a problem, all the lawyers start chasing those claims.
Yeah.
Right. This is Americanism that's actually also entered Europe and the UK and Europe. So now what you get is that you one or two people got problems. There's been a case setting that says that, okay, the insurers are liable, and then almost becomes a swarm of activity chasing insurers for coverage and for settlement. So that was happening, and the claims were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The Lloyd's market realized that it needed to actually understand the exposure, not just the Lloyd's market, the Lloyd's market and non-Lloyd's market. So they set up in the late 80s, early 90s, a company called London Market Claims to help actually act as a bureau to collect all this information and make sense of it so that the market could try to one day settle. But the numbers started growing and growing and growing, and they didn't really have a way of collecting the information in a way that they could make sense of it. So there wasn't really a proper consolidated database that enabled them to do some data science activity on it, right?
Yeah.
So we came in, helped them do that. That enabled them to analyze exposures. Then they used that to actually essentially settle with the US courts an amount of money, which happened to be $16 billion, which was a lot of money in those days, in the 90s, to enable them to settle that amount for the Lloyd's market. So the Lloyd's market could then say, right, here's the amount of money, we're going to put it in reserve, and then it enables us to carry on with our lives, underwriting for the future, right? So
in a sense, it's what, just making your life a bit easier.
Yeah. So what it is, so they've effectively created a payment plan over. They've allocated a bunch of money with potential payment plans for some people that needed settlements to enable them to carry on budgeting for the future, right? So it's just a way of carving out all the liabilities that were coming into a pot that was an agreed pot that they could then settle out from. And of course, when it came to settling, they were quite aggressive about settling, so it enabled them to employ people and settle amicably, right? So yeah, I mean, these things keep hitting the market. I mean, the credit crunch I referred to earlier was essentially I suppose pass the parcel until the music stops. Let's see what's in it. Oh dear, there's more liabilities than I've got money for. That was in 2008, and then more recently, opioids, the magic painkilling treatment that basically is turned some people into addicts, and actually has been the #1 killer in the US for the last 5 years. Suicides and all sorts of horrible things, and there are claims coming for that as well. So I think the market constantly has, certainly when I talk about the market, the insurance market around Lloyd's constantly has these problems. Why? Because nobody else deals with these complex claims. They do. They happen to be underwriting the businesses that probably are the manufacturers of these products in the first place. So when things go bad and there's some liability around the product, either because the car is unsafe or the piece of software doesn't work properly, these things come home to roost, and the Lloyd's market, the ones normally that pick up the tab for it.
Yeah, and I suppose you have to look into quite great detail about who you're insuring. Because you never know, like be the next opiate scandal, Cool. So I'm gonna ask a little bit about I'll ask a little bit about lockdown. I'm thinking we'll just move over a little bit because I just wanted to talk about if you thought that potentially, you know, with everyone working at home and sort of being able to do it remotely and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's affected your market in any way? And if so, like which way?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm going to answer this in several ways, but I'm going to skip to the byproduct of the 2-year pandemic, right? Because I think it's an inflection point between one state of the economy to another, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes things, go through a transition from one state to another, right? So the 2-year pandemic periods, for one of a, or the lockdown periods as you just described it, the end aspect of that is that we've all realized or realizing that there are skill shortages. So when we started to employ, we've realized the skill shortages. We also realized that people, certainly our clients, haven't been set up to deal with it properly. So when they haven't been able to recruit, and also because they haven't got maybe the same robust processes because they're so used to working in groups. As soon as that became fractured and distributed, to home working, some of their processes weren't as robust as they thought, right? So that was on their side. On our side, yeah, I mean, having sort of talked about threats to the economy and the threat of connected risk, which is a key underlying theme of ours. Of course, we were as shocked as many about the manner in which the government locked down. They almost created, in fact, they created a threat that was actually worse than the pandemic itself, right? By locking people down.
Yeah.
Because there were economic hardships to come by doing that, but also social problems that were going to be created by it, certainly but for the people that couldn't work from home. But from our perspective, we were kind of pseudo hybrid working anyway. Some people could work from home when they wanted to. Ironically, we weren't as robust in the sense that not everybody could. So we, prior to the lockdown, because we go through an exercise for re-evaluating and repurchasing hardware. We went through an exercise in 2019, and as part of that, we weren't meant to. We thought we might as well get everybody a laptop as well, so they can work from home if they want to. We didn't know anything about the pandemic at that time.
Really, that just looked.
All of that arrived. All of that arrived a week before, and then when we realised that because we'd been on European travel prior to lockdown. In fact, a week before lockdown, we just kind of came back from our last trip and realised that people were starting to take the pandemic seriously, and people were starting to have some of their travel restricted and were asked to go home from business trips, and there was lots of uncertainty. So then we realized that if that were the case, then how would we function? So we started looking at video conferencing, which we'd never done. We'd done audio conferencing, we'd never done video conferencing, right? So a week before was probably the first time we put Teams in as a company, right? So literally as the decisions were being made, we were transitioning to hybrid working without actually knowing what hybrid working was, right? But I guess that the key thing in all of this, it doesn't matter whether you work in an office, you work completely remotely, connecting people that you'd never seen before. In the end, you've got to have strong processes and a strong trust mechanism. In the end of the day, it comes back to the same things that have driven humanity throughout, right? You don't trust one another, it ain't going to work, right? So you've got to have trust in people and trust in the processes, and trust in a lot of things, and be transparent to all the downsides, right? So if there are issues, you've got to be transparent to the issues, right? Otherwise they'll just stir up and create problems elsewhere, right? So I think we've been on a journey of discovery ourselves, right? And what this has done, rather than actually weaken us, has actually strengthened us. So we've recruited through the pandemic often recruiting people that we never physically seen.
Yeah.
And also realized that we needed to recruit our own. So we created our own academy and did a relationship with Sheffield Hallam, who ironically were previously in contact numerous occasions and it never went anywhere. Right? So that was purely by accident as well, right? It was just, I guess, that the timing of the email when we'd realized that we were getting gazumped, the equivalent of being gazumped.
Yeah.
So you interview people, you short the number of people down to 1 or 2, you interview them and you pick one, and that person says yes, you make an offer, and in the afternoon they accept, and the next morning ring up and say, sorry, I'd like to decline so almost reversing the decision. So that happened to us out of 3 times, 3 application, was it 4? It was either 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3. So I think we were going for 4 places, and 3 people did that. You'd gone through a whole process, and they'd said no. They said yes, then no again, right? So that's when we realized there was something going on and in the marketplace. And obviously, speaking to other people, realized that other people are experiencing problems as well. Sheffield Hallam just happened to email at that time about the apprenticeship program. So now we've got an ongoing exercise to actually take 18-year-olds through to graduate and employed basis. So we want to make that a key theme of our ongoing business development, or sort of, I suppose, skills development. I mean, being a company that's dealing in data and analytics, inevitably we are a technology company that happens to deal with data and deal with business issues in a simple way. So the skill of the people is a key aspect of our DNA.
So do you think it's actually potentially benefited you?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's made us be more, I suppose, trustful in our thinking, trustful in our journey, and trustful in the way in which we're going about it, because it's a lot more transparent in what we're doing. And we've had to do this because we've onboarded so many people. We've almost gone through a weekly strategy update, which we have never done before. It's been an annual thing, setting through lots of consultation. You set it and you maybe review it half yearly. This has been constant adjustments throughout, which is kind of interesting because you can find people that are really onboarded from the ones that maybe aren't necessarily, and you can make appropriate adjustments to get everybody on the journey, right? Because in the end, it is a team philosophy, no different to any sport, right?
Yeah. Cool. So you're correct me if I'm wrong, but you founded the Russell Group.
Yeah.
So how did you come to make the decision to found it, and why?
Right. Okay. So I did. I left. I did an undergrad in Manchester in aeronautics, and then did 3 years research at Rolls-Royce in Derby with Nottingham University. Realized that actually academia or research wasn't my bag. I wanted to get in the commercial world, and I'd realized that actually in the early 90s, the aerospace industry was going through a massive transition, and not too dissimilar to now. There were a lot of job cuts, and the aerospace companies like BAE were actually investing in other things. So BAE, so it's British Aerospace, actually founded one of the initial founding members of Orange, believe it or not. So with Hutchinson Telecom, so a lot because these companies they're well established, have deep pockets. They constantly innovate outside of their space. So I realized that actually maybe technology was the space I should be in. So ended up with Oracle Corporation, got shipped off to Silicon Valley, then came back and they basically for almost 4 years got me troubleshooting. I was never actually a software programmer. I was actually more people manager and a problem solver. So they would send me into projects that were failing and get me to turn them around, and that's what I did for 4 years, and then realized I should be doing this myself, and then really got lucky with the first project. So it was a small project, and it was just an opportunity to maybe do the same thing myself.
Brilliant. You've talked a lot about having a strong trust between your colleagues and everyone you work with. Do you think that is a requirement in your industry?
Certainly our industry that we're in is obviously the whole foundation of insurance is based on utmost good faith, right? So you obviously don't get that if you don't have trust, right? So to get in the industry, it's very hard. Once you're in the industry, and you're earning your trust, right? But your trust could be lost, like in any project. You're only as good as your last project, and that's the same, or in your case, you're only as good as your last journal, right? That you write. So you earn your trust by obviously doing the right research and building networks, right? So I guess all I'm trying to say is that the external network that we're building and the internal network that we're building, the idea is, as a business owner, you want to make that as transparent and as intertwined as possible, because if you can do that, then you've got more of yourself in other people that can actually help grow the company, right? And then create more and more scale for the business, right? Which has to be done on, proper structure, but also trust is a key element. You can't rough shot your way through this.
Yeah, brilliant.
That only works until the landscape changes, right? And now the landscape has massively changed, and now for the ones that
after all the
for the ones that have the right culture, they're just getting on with it, right?
Yeah. Cool. So I wanted to sort of move over into talk about a bit of current affairs. Obviously with the cost of living crisis going on and the economic state of the UK right now, what is your take on sort of what's happening and where it's all sort of gone so wrong? Hard question, I know.
Yeah, it's a hard question, right? I'd say that if you look at 2022, 1992, 1962, 1932, you probably realize every 30 years something similar happens, right?
Yeah.
So history does repeat itself.
Yeah.
In fact, Churchill said to Queen Elizabeth, and Queen Elizabeth was actually the further back in history you look, the further into the future you can see, right? And part of the issue is that every generation we don't have memory, right? So we make the same mistakes, right? Well, so I think that this thing was inevitably going to come. So what are the differences between the 90s, early 90s and now? Well, we had inflation, we had interest rates rising. The interest rates were, Christ, 5 times what they are now. I can't remember the level of inflation. Inflation must have been double digit, right? And it is double digit now. I think the problem has been overconsumption, which the credit industry has enabled, and that was done in the 90s, which is the byproduct of the globalization. We've got to a position where we've been living well outside of our means, which I don't think we've ever had to do before. So in the prior times, people have only really lived within what they could get, right? So there was no form of credit.
Yeah.
Now there's credit, and also we've got cost of goods rising. So people have managed the cash flow with credit. The problem is that now you've got goods rising and the interest rate on credit rising. I think it's an awful situation that we find ourselves in. It's got worse by governments bailing out in 2018 the finance industries that were affected by the credit crunch. And they're now bailing out lots of industries because of the pandemic. So we're debt ridden. Now, I think, in the end, you could take the view that that the credit crunch, or credit crisis, is, we're going to have to knuckle down and deal with it. Well, it's very difficult to knuckle down and deal with it if ends don't meet, right? So I think that the government has a choice. The government could either balance finances and run the risk of more and more people falling into a humanitarian crisis, or it can realize that that actually it needs to deal with a humanitarian crisis prior to. Now, the problem is that whichever way you look, this government's now a sitting duck. Whatever it does, I'd be shocked if it lasted 18 months, right? Because I think the way that they're going, it seems to be a blame culture. 12 years of blame culture is too long. I think, we've had lots of events, and maybe the spending hasn't been in the right places. And, in the end, if we come back to the point that I made earlier, the best run companies are the ones where you have a level of transparency and trust. Well, we don't have that between the workforce and the government at the moment.
No.
So whichever way you look at it, it's not looking good. Without me being too political, right? Because I particularly don't want to be too political. You're answering the question. You're asking the question, and I'm trying to answer it. I mean, it's a hard time.
I mean, you mentioned UK inflation on the rise. In your opinion, what is probably the most important, not important factors, but contributing factors to that, do you think?
Well, okay. This may sound a little odd, right?
Hit me with it.
Okay. I'm going to put the thing down to football, right? Coming to bring it down to something simple, right? If you've never had a youth team, and you've always brought in the talent and never grown your own, when that talent becomes limited, you have to spend more for it, don't you? Right?
This is a metaphor for goods in the UK.
Well, absolutely, right? So the whole thing is that the EU has got us into being part of something bigger. As soon as you exit, of course, you're going to feel a massive shock, right? Because now you've got artificial trade barriers where you've never had trade barriers, right? Now, in the short term, we were always going to have a shock from it. But in the longer term, and this is my point, right? In the longer term, you as long as you invest in your own, and and I don't mean at the expense of foreign workers. You need foreign workers as well, right? But you must have a youth policy as well of growing your own talent. If you don't grow your own talent, how can you possibly compete in a world where people realize that the only way to money and success is to have good education, have good work experience, right? So that, you know, if you don't have that hunger, you never better compete, right? So the government needs to, the buck stops with the government. They're the people that are actually making the decisions to grow stuff. So sometimes you have to grow stuff. You have to become a farmer, right? And that's, I think, the other aspect that where you see if farming isn't making it into policy and always a sideshow, that kind of tells you that the things that are wrong, right? Policies have been dictated by big global corporations that really have only got their own interests in mind, and we will feel the consequences of that as a country.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. So just to finish off, really, I want to know a bit more about the hardest thing about your position as manager with the Russell Group.
Oh, learning to let myself down. I guess that sometimes I have to be a little level-headed, right? So, you know, so where you're trying to drive a company forward, sometimes you've always got your own sense of aspiration and challenges, and sometimes you got to realize that actually even achieving 50% of it can be viewed as a success. Even though you never. So I think that you know, it's that whole culture of recognizing the benefits of growth and managing growth properly, and not necessarily just, you know, we've hit a target, fine, when we reach the next target, sometimes you have to realize that things find their own order, and as much as we try to push it, the order sometimes finds itself naturally. And that's where culture is important. It's the culture that as much as I may detach myself from the culture and say, right, we're doing this, that, and the other, unless I actually create a culture that also understands that, there's always going to be a ball and chain type scenario, right? And so you almost have to live in the culture and sometimes live out the culture. And it's you know, it's half the time you have the sense of feeling like, where is my padded cell?
Yeah. Do you feel like do you almost feel like a strong, like, moral obligation then to have this good culture of trust? And
I think I think that, I mean, I think you things are a lot easier if people you know, you can't be transparent with everything. You're going to be transparent with as much as you can be, right? Because, you know, people can't understand everything, right? There has to be a buffer, right? But the point is that is trying to create the culture where you're trying to say that, fine, there's always going to be a buffer, but there will come a point where there's no buffer, where the whole thing is totally aligned. Then there doesn't need to be a buffer, right? Because people can understand and accept the truth.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's all my questions. Is there anything you wanted to ask?
No. Which year in uni are you?
I'm second year multimedia journalism. Uni, so this is just for my feature writing.
You should. I mean, feature writing is you know, we do quite a lot of thought leadership, and you know, we've got writers within the company. I mean, in fact, I mean, one of the writers is a freelancer publicist. The other one used to be a publicist that now is full-time brand strategy. My middle son actually works at Russell in marketing, but actually his ambition is to write. No, he's written scripts. No, he's actually to write and direct his own film. And he's done short films.
Brilliant.
So yeah, he's got his own production company.
Yeah, like father like son.
but the idea really is that the world has created a leveling. There is very much. I mean, leveling up is the wrong word, but that's all I was trying to say is that technology has really kind of lowered the barriers to entry for a lot. Certainly the creative industries, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that with all the platforms that you now have access to, you can effectively get into any of the content writing aspects as possible, right? So
Yeah,
I would say if I were you, I would encourage that. Get yourself start writing, get yourself seen and heard, and who knows? Yeah.
Really, I find it quite fun to write, but that's why I'm enjoying this, I think.
It's a good skill, right? It's a good skill. Words stop wars. Or start wars.
Reminds me of that cartoon of like the pen when they, I think what was it? It was some, I forget now, but it was some terror attacks that happened, and loads of cartoons came out where it was like the pen is stronger than the.
Oh yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Wasn't it? I can't remember the
Oh,
name.
it was Hebdo, wasn't it?
Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah.
Something Hebdo. Yeah, I mean that was the pen is stronger than terror.
Yeah.
And it's. I mean that's half the thing, isn't it? To be expressive, there's no right or wrong to anything really. I mean, I guess that being overly at the edges is probably not a good place. But sometimes you have to be the edges to see the whole thing.
It's a difference between making something interesting and making something acceptable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but sometimes the challenge that you have always is to challenge what is acceptable.
Definitely.
All right, well listen, I'll let you get on. Thanks for that, and
no worries. I really appreciate you coming on and giving me this. But yeah, I don't know what you're doing for the rest of your day, but I hope you
I'll be on lots of different meetings on platforms like this.
They do well.
Do
well then.
All right, then, Adam. You take care, right?
You take care too.
Cheers, mate.
See you later. Bye-bye.